science, memory, technology, and transparency. Do you know how to use these keys to find your own mastery, your purpose, and your mission? I'll shed some light on that. I'm Roach, Mark Roach. I'm here to help you understand what you need, what you want, maybe to learn the difference, to get what you really, really need and want. Have you considered the power of having multiple perspectives? What if you could zoom in on the view of maybe your boss, or zoom in on the view of your wife, and maybe even inhabit their life for a day or a week or a month, or reflect on a period that was difficult for them, to have a better understanding of who they are and how they're operating. Some people might call that empathy, but let's just consider it as a perspective, that maybe if you could find a way to own their perspective temporarily, you'd understand how they're wired and what their needs are and what their wants are and what's driving them, how they see themselves, understand their own self-identity and their hierarchy of needs. And then whenever you have an encounter with them, can you imagine one of the lines that I recall from early childhood from the Bible was the idea of turning the other cheek. If you had this perspective, the other perspective of them versus your own perspective, versus your own hardened and maybe bitter perspective, if you could somehow transpose and let yourself feel their perspective when they were confronting you or challenging you or frustrating you or loving you, what if that gave you the power to turn the other cheek because you understood that they were maybe not necessarily threatening you for what you want, that maybe they were just acting out of momentum from the way that they had been entrained, or how they were hypnotized by their past and how they were acting. What if you're able to see them differently and react to them without that same old defensiveness that just basically created this back and forth between the two of you, a battle for who's going to give in and who's going to be stronger or weaker in that particular, whatever it was around that particular issue that was causing distress. If you could turn the other cheek and really understand their perspective and not feel threatened as you turned the cheek, but you turn the cheek with confidence and in love to them, to yourself, and in faith that whatever the circumstance was that was drawing this despair between you in the past could suddenly be let go, and you could turn the other cheek and allow the Spirit to fill the void there. Wow. Is that possible? Do you have the tools? Did I do a good enough job of explaining it that you can just go do it now? Can you sit in your chair or in the pew and get a lesson and put that into action in your life? Well, there's many verses that I heard in my early childhood and memorized and recited. And then as I was memorizing them, there was this effort that I was finding inside of me to reconcile them, to understand them, and to own them. I mean, these were coming from the masters. You know, I was told that this scripture I was working with was from God and that it was holy. And, you know, it was also written in this translation that was the old, you know, King James Version, which used words and phrasing that as a 3, 4, 5-year-old, 6-year-old kid, you know, even today, you know, as a 50 or 60-year-old-ish person, those words don't mean anything in our society. Well, they may mean something to some people, but they're just so uncommon that it took a lot of soul searching for me to try to get to the bottom of what they were really trying to communicate. Another one is render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. You know, I think there was, you know, a lot of wisdom in some of these verses, and they had deep spiritual meaning. And, you know, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, you know, that's like, you know, pay your taxes, give the government, you know, what is due. Well, you know, where's the wisdom in that? Well, in the spiritual sense, taking the spiritual life and separating it from what's happening in the physical or material plane is a powerful tool. And the spiritual realm is its own. And people are really trying to entangle the two. And that's where a lot of the spiritual efforts in life have failed for the common person who has really been misled. So the priority is often reversed. I mean, most of the focus, and actually a lot of the stuff that is called woo-woo or spiritual is kind of scoffed and laughed at and made fun of because it doesn't have a tangible cause and effect, observable pattern that you can see leading to your bank account or to your making you more of what you've been trained to believe you need to be more of, to be worthy. So the priority has been reversed. The focus is really, the enlightened focus is on the spiritual and letting the material have its place. And I'm not saying to diminish the material at the expense of the spiritual, but I'm saying focus on the spiritual and take the physical and the material seriously and watch what happens. But don't try to intermingle the two. I'll come back to that later, but the priority has been reversed and used against you. Your body is here as a pathway, and your mind gets in the way of that pathway quite often. Remember the apple? I mean, where in the old story, you know, from Genesis of the Bible about, you know, where the apple was the fruit of knowledge. And that's what got in the way of man owning or actually being fully in connection with God. And that was where the separation occurred. So think about that. or don't think about it. Try not to think about it. And that's the challenge that we have more often than not today. And we're looking for outcomes to our prayers and to our spiritual efforts. And we're often looking to them on the spiritual plane. Or we're not looking for them on the spiritual plane. It's funny how I transpose that. We're looking for something to manifest on the physical plane when our real connection and the real things that we're learning more about today are our real spiritual needs. The physical stuff is taking care of itself. I mean, we're even getting artificial intelligence and robots, and we're training them on all the patterns that we do dogmatically. So you can even have these robots go fight our wars for us. So the victory's really already been won. And when Jesus came here, actually, his message was, because of what was going to happen with him, that all of the old dogmatic, the mental efforts, the sacrifices, the need for priests, and all of these rituals, he was a rebel. He was overturning all of that. And then after he left, the word back then they didn't have anything but, stone tablets, and maybe they did write on some, some type of, skins or something that have been, preserved, for this day, and until the printing press came in 1650? Or anyway, it's been 400 or 500 years ago. And that's given us a chance to repeat over and over the stories that had at one time been told over and over orally. And that's how, many of these stories that we have been preserved and have made their way into these sacred texts. And I'm not denying the importance of those texts and those stories, but I think we lose sight often of the power that Jesus really did bring as to our connection to the supernatural through our bodies. And the spirit is really something that is very difficult to put on to, and we're seeing that with our science and technology and all this transparency, how difficult it is to capture life and authentic connections and to be able to repeat them. I mean, most filmmakers, they love to find directors and actors that can forget they're being watched and can have real emotions and real connections, with these scripted stories. And then they'll have to do them over and over and over again to be captured by the camera and the audio, and the lighting has to be just right for the perfect contrived story to be formed so it can be cast out and sold, and basically to try to inspire and move an audience. So your body can do all of that. It's not just in those super trained actors or naturally gifted people or people who were dropped into these super wealthy communities or homes where they could take the time to pursue these, the arts and the things that many people don't have the chance to pursue because they're so busy trying to survive in the world that has been and the momentum that has formed around us with these practices of industry and capitalism. So this momentum that has filled generations before us, struggling against the spirit, trying to survive, and it's destroyed our nervous systems. It's destroyed our relationships. The same wars are being fought today that were fought thousands of years ago, just in different ways. And we still don't understand everything that and how it is happening around us. We don't understand it all. And we've always had this arrogance around us where we do believe that we have control. And a lot of that is built into our sense of trying to tell ourselves that everything is going to be okay. We're safe and secure. And then we have children, and then we try to tell them, if you do this, this, and this, everything will be okay. Even though we're kind of lying to ourselves because we know that we've not fed our spirits and we've failed to connect with each other in ways that we can really have some certainty of safety and security for future generations. But once you see that the unity is present and it's around us, and that's what Jesus was talking about thousands of years ago, and then these old patterns that he was trying to relieve us from, they basically got recast just with different names, and the power shifted, and they ended up turning it back into a lot of dogma and repetition, and a lot of these stories were used against the best wishes of the Spirit. So this unity is present around us, and I've seen it. Like when there's a natural disaster. When I was in a hurricane in Houston, Texas, I saw people drop all of their pretenses and chip in to help each other in a neighborhood where everyone had been so isolated and competitive and trying to one-up each other. But whenever this commonality of that nature brought to Houston, when that occurred, I saw people really, really helping their neighbors out and getting to know their neighbors, making sacrifices without checking to see if someone was watching. Imagine that. So they were, some of these things just happened organically and naturally, and the best in people came out. Of course, there were cases where, that wasn't so, but in the neighborhood that I was in, I did see this unity emerge and this commonality that in self-respect and respect for each other and for, values that I felt were noble and worthy. And then after everything got better, everything returned back to normal, everyone went back into their isolation. And suddenly there were the plastic waves and the hollow hellos in the rush of the lifestyle. So I invite you, I encourage you to slow down and have some courage. Courage to look into the eyes of your loved ones, of your family, of your friends, of your coworkers, of strangers, and look for others who are looking for spiritual connection. Build this tribe. Let life work. Let the Spirit work. Relax and allow. Another verse that comes to mind is something to the tune of, does God not feed the birds and the animals? So why wouldn't he take care of you? Well, that always seemed like a challenge to many of us as to what that meant and how do you do that? And I've got a lot to say about that. letting go of the old dogma that's really tearing you apart is one of the first steps. Remember the story about Peter trying to walk on water? Well, faith is a challenge for most of us. When our construct of how everything works is this cause and effect in the material plane, and we don't have any spiritual understanding because we really don't have any spiritual life, yes, that's where you sink. And that's where we feel like we don't have any choice but to try to play things out on the physical and the material plane. I encourage you to maintain your spiritual connection with others and let the material plane take care of itself. That's where the discipline lies. And that's what you can do. Sometimes doing is actually restraining and not doing anything on the material and focusing on the feelings, the spiritual connections, and noticing what's happening. Because just as we've learned, as we've watched man evolve over the years, I mean, imagine 1,000, 2,000 years ago, Michael Jordan would not have had a basketball field to become a hero. That realm just didn't exist. So there are realms that we've discovered today that are powerful, and they connect us and they give us a means of expressing, just like cell phones. Someone would have been killed thousands of years ago with the idea that we'd be able to call somebody and talk to them all the way across the world. They were killing people for saying that the world was round back in the day. So that if you can feel along with me here, if you take that nonsense, that nonsensical, that way of disputing what would have appeared to be supernatural, 1,000 or 2,000 years ago, and allow yourself to feel in the moment right now, and trust that all these promises that the masters, that Jesus have spoken of are possible for you, then there's a way for you to find peace in the moment that may allow you to transcend all the barriers and obstacles that you've never been allowed to surpass, to actually begin to live the life as yourself, to actually be. So find a way to let go of oversimplified cause and effect scenarios that really make you feel small, that make you feel defeated, or like you're a victim and that you're unloved, or that you're not enough. Find a way to let go of that cause and effect. Notice how that scenario starts to play out about, well, this happens, then this happens, then this happens, and I end up, with nothing. I am nothing. That's how the self-talk goes. Versus trusting the moment, trusting the Spirit. And if you look back to the proof that's in our long history of being arrogant and thinking we know it all, when we're really acting like killer monkeys and trying to dominate each other, that's what brings down civilizations. So archaeology is rich with those stories and records of the surprises that nature really holds over us. And nature, when I say nature, I'm talking about God and the Holy Spirit and, Jesus and all of these powerful forces that are present around us in the moment, in this very moment, that you can grab onto, because the Spirit has survived and we're here. And the mental and material avenues have not produced the safety and security that they've been sold to us as bringing. And nor does philanthropy or the programs that you buy that are going to turn your life around. They may have good intentions and been based in some good fundamentals, but many of them have failed to deliver. So now is the time to make the Spirit possible in our lives. And I'm seeing more and more opportunities for that with the science that's out there, the connections we're having with each other, and more importantly, with the transparency with each other, which really kind of goes back to, confessing what's the truths that are going on in your lives that are really meaningful, and connecting on those rather than on the suffering and the sacrifice and the aspirations. But finding the simple spiritual connections are more and more available and more visible. Accept. Don't protest or fight. Those are not your fights. There is another scripture from the Bible that says, resist not evil. And that stuck with me for a long time as to what that meant. Since the victory's already really won, it's just not necessary. The more you resist and suppress, the more difficult things become. I was also reminded of, saw a video of Prince where he was singing Purple Rain. And I couldn't help but be inspired by it because, when it rains, it rains on the good and the bad, or whatever your view is of everyone. But it happens to all of us that are alive at the same time in your community. And in that way, it brings us together. And the idea that the rain is purple is almost like giving yourself a chance to believe in something supernatural. And I found it to be a very pleasant and inspiring thought to feel the Spirit that has obviously survived thousands of years, that's still here, that does connect us, but that we have not found a way to create the platform to really connect with each other and sustain that Spirit so we can talk about it and see it and feel it and believe in it. Believe in it more than the cause and effect that we try to ascribe to the realities of the physical and material plane around us. So let yourself do that. Let yourself enjoy the purple rain. And imagine that the talents that we have are no longer used to dominate or entertain, that they'd be more used to inspire us in our one-on-one connections, that we could actually see these things in each other rather than just in our heroes or celebrities. Imagine that. It's possible. It's actually already happening. It's just we're missing out on it in seeing those things in each other because there's so much momentum around building up heroes in the hierarchy around us. That hierarchy just creates a slavery and a dominance and a subservience in our society. But if you see this in yourself and in others, the real talents in the Spirit, the magical things in the moment, those are things that only the Spirit can really, really support and bring freedom to you. And if you try to meet the Spirit halfway, then you will begin to feel the magic that I'm trying to relate to you now. And you may end up questioning the stories that you've been trained to believe. And your body's likely filled with barriers that it's anger and loss. I mean, it's real loss because people have been I mean, women have been the chattel of war. We've taken African Americans and turned them into slaves, for centuries. And we're just now learning how to let go of that so that in the material plane, people can really have a chance to feel free. So, there's a lot that's buried in the misuse and the manipulation of stories. There's a lot that's buried in the misuse and manipulation of stories to minimize the fear. The fear of letting go. The fear that if you do that, evil will win. Well, it only wins under secrecy and dominance and the suppression where these mental constructs hold you to this cause and effect. That knowledge, like if we go back to Genesis again, talk about the apple, this is the real secret. Letting go of that mental construct or an argument that you can justify that leads to some material benefits. Well, those material benefits can happen, but it's unlikely that the primary objective of the spirit is to make a football team win this one or to have this hero be more heroic or for you to idolize someone else. The real victory is going to come from finding your own mission, your own purpose, the reason you're here, and also being able to see that and connect with others and help them walk in their path. And these material victories have always been temporary, and they'll certainly be forgotten. We forget so easily. And that's the beauty of science and the memory that's building in our technology to remind us, that's really creating this transparency that we can use to support our spiritual lives. Because it's going to let us go of this mundane, dogmatic repetition. Think about this. I mentioned perspective earlier, but imagine 300 years ago. Our Constitution was written, the U.S. Constitution. It was penned by hypocrites who were slave owners and using power for building their own fortunes, and womanizers, and they were using it basically as a calling card because it was all filled with everything everyone wanted to hear. It's a great advertisement to the world to come to America and pursue your fantasy of freedom on the physical plane. And then they sprinkled in a little bit of God and, faith and, virtue, justice. And we all know that those things are still being they're very, very difficult to find in that construct. And, I'm not going to downplay the benefits that I've had in my life, because I think a lot of this transparency and the science and the evolution that we've had in mankind are due to some of these stages that we've been in. But now it's time to wake up and see the truth. But who am I to say? But I am just trying to say the truth of the matter. And it's clear. I don't need a study to show me this. Suppression, that is a dangerous track. That alters your focus. And it is a very delicate walk to fight against some of the feelings of the dark side. But suppression actually heightens your vulnerability to the dark side. So you have to find a way to examine and understand those primal needs. And you have to be able to find ways to understand each other and these other perspectives that are very much alive around us, and find a way to respect each other and talk about this and communicate and connect, because I think that's where the dark side of mankind gets built up and ends up acting out, and just to continue to create these battles that are never really won, but they get band-aided and preserved for the next generation to fight again. And these battles take you away from spirit. They fill you with fear, more pursuit of dominance, survival, and they get illuminated in your body, and it can bleed into your spirit and distract you to the point that you're obsessed, even addicted, with fulfilling unmet drives and needs that keep you from enjoying the spirit. So it's going to take some time, but if you commit, if you make the choice to really pursue the spirit, make that your priority above the material, you and future generations will surely benefit from the spiritual platform that is clearly forming with the concurrence of our transparency and seeing how we have this common thirst for spiritual connection. I'm Roach. I'm Mark Roach. All the best.